Hey guys, Kira's here. You know, I was thinking a lot about what it really makes to make a society, and I've said a lot of times about, I think there should be deregulation when it comes to social issues. Like, there really should be no race issues or laws about race, color, gender, orientation. Actually, to extend that, laws between sex between consenting adults. I really don't think there should be. But it runs into a problem. And the problem is when you deregulate people's liberties, what you get is a private consensus. And that consensus usually ends up being something that favors one group or another. And that's what you see in the past. Everything that you call racist, sexist, is just somebody's private version of their morality, their ethics. You might say lack of ethics, but not so long ago, you would have been the one with lack of ethics. A serious lack of ethics. And in some circles, you still are. It just isn't as accepted anymore. The view is shifted. And sometimes I wonder if it's not all just a view, a perspective, a talking point of a way to see things in a certain way. And I won't lie, I'm talking about sexuality, gay rights, women's rights, in some sense, race also. But does this mean I totally disagree with those things? Well, no, because first and foremost, I would say my sentiment is that even as a small government conservative, is that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the end goal for all. How could you take such grand words and reduce them to dividing laws and rules of society? That doesn't seem like liberty to me. And I don't want to get into rant about equality and all that, because the short of it is that I view liberty instead of equality, because equality chains you. Liberty lifts you up. And I would have to get into a whole thing about that. But what I was getting at was that how I would combat this private collectivism. Because like Ayn Rand said, the worst racism is the most cruel and primitive form of collectivism. And anyone who's an objectivist, who sees things in objective, real terms, would realize that that's not freedom. And that's the most important thing. Of course, your freedom and this other person's freedom can vastly differ. So, my solution would be economic. And why I say economic is that I picture that in a capitalist society, if class is based off financial status in our consumer culture, then with a few laws just to ensure that there's no private collectivism, or at least limit it without totally engorging the federal government to have a hand in every say of our cultural values, is that people put aside these issues of social inequality to get to the real underlying problem, and that is class separation. If class is a matter of money, and money dictates class in a capitalist society, then by establishing a reduction in the stratification of the social classes will bring more economic prosperity. People will be more empowered to make political changes. And what that means is that if we could change the shape of our country, a lot of those problems that go along with race, gender, and issues about sexuality would be very much more easily solved with the resolution of the economic problems that go with them. Why do I say this? Because I grew up in a suburban area that had a displacement of a richer white area to the north and a suburban area that was mostly ethnic, black and Hispanic, and everyone used to always blame their woes on the man, the system. You know, they were being disenfranchised. But then I moved out to the Midwest for a while, and what I saw there in a small town I was living in was that a town that was just completely depleted of everything but a few residential areas, where everybody took their Land Rovers and made it over to civilization 10, 20 miles here or there to go find the resources to live. And it's just, it doesn't make sense to me in that aspect, because in one hand you've got a concrete jungle, and in the other you've got small town shrinking oases of rural and urban rural decay. Now, if everybody was to change in alternative energy, biofuel, whatever, all the things progressives talk about the infrastructure and other issues with oil and alternative energy and all that, if the population was homogenized between all those little fading hamlets and these huge, overbeared, clunky clusters of urbanization, and people went to the towns they wanted to go to, that was a mix of suburban, a small hub of urban and a rural infrastructure, with all the infrastructures being remodeled. And I'm talking some of this about jobs staying here, cheap labor staying out. I know, but I'm talking about people having a living wage. I'm talking about any color of American, and I'm talking about America right now, although it could apply to any other country in the world with a few variances, picking their own crops and establishing their own energy infrastructure. And that wouldn't be too hard to do, considering that a lot of crop material is subsidized, and that means that it's just ground into the dirt so the prices won't go so low that a farmer won't can make ends meet. All that material could go into biowaste and oil, natural oil, plus waste reclamation, waste source reclamations. A lot of new interesting technologies could cut the lines of infrastructure. You know what a strong infrastructure means? A strong infrastructure means that it takes the salt out of a lot of those social problems. Those social problems that are endless and endless and endless and divide us. And that's what gets my goat, is that we don't have to live this way. But we won't cut each other a break. It's all about, oh, let's save the planet. Oil is evil. No blood for oil. But, and I'm not talking about drill baby drill, because there are some realities about oil and drilling, and they're not pretty. And there's a lot of not pretty things about fossil fuel next to people's habitats. That would have to change too. You have to have respect for people's living conditions. And that's why I'm anti-corporation, because if individual people owned it and they were responsible, the cycle of wealth would be more evenly distributed. And with that, people could take control and rise and fall within the cycle of wealth and poverty and be empowered. And that's the point, is that with people going up in the thing, there wouldn't be an artificial barrier for anyone of race, any women, or anyone's private sexual business, as long as it was consensual and it wasn't violent or impeding upon society, like solicitation or things like that. And that's what I really believe. So when I talk about, oh, I don't like this sex laws and these or these advocacy laws, I don't. I don't, because I feel like it perpetuates the same problems over and over again without the adequate direction of facing some real solutions that would probably unravel these problems. And I want to see them unraveled. The cycle of nothingness has got to end. That's what I believe.